Earthlings. Thank you for tuning in to the special advanced screening for one of our new favorite shows, The Man Who Fell to Earth. I'm Emily Gibson, co-founder and co-executive director for ATX TV, and this is Jennifer Morgan, director of programming.
We are thrilled to be able to share an exclusive first look at this brand new episode, and of course, to dive into the show with some of its very talented stars and creatives.
There's so much good TV on right now. We know it can be hard to figure out where to start sometimes.
I recommend starting with Showtime.
Okay, I'll second that. We know it can be hard to know what you're getting into with a new series, what's going to be worth the time investment, which shows of them something new to say, what's going to make you actually want to put down your phone for an hour. And when we got a first look at the show, we knew pretty quickly it was all of those things.
Plus, it's funny, epic, timely, got complicated family dynamics, shady medical experiments. What's not to love?
Exactly.
Before we hand it over to our moderator, this is your friendly reminder to keep any and all spoilers under wraps until this episode airs on Sunday on Showtime. You can, however, brag to your friends that you've already seen it and direct them to this panel for all the fun things they missed.
And make sure to tune in Sundays on Showtime for new episodes of The Man Who Fell to Earth.
And now we'd like to introduce our moderator, NPR critic, and one of our go-to authorities on great TV, Eric Deggans. Hey, Eric.
Hey. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. Welcome. I'm Eric Deggans, TV critic for National Public Radio, and I am a bona fide sci-fi nerd. So it is my pleasure to welcome the producers and cast from Showtime's The Man Who Fell to Earth. We've got a star-studded lineup here, so let's meet the folks behind the limited series. First, we've got Jenny Lumet, executive producer and writer. We've got Alex Kurtzman, executive producer and writer. We've got Oscar nominee Naomie Harris, who plays Justin Falls. And we've got Oscar nominee Chiwetel Ejiofor, who plays Mr. Faraday, the man who fell to Earth. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I got to ask now, you guys have said before, this isn't really a reboot or a revival of the 1976 movie, but it is kind of connected to it. Talk to us a little bit about what exactly this is and how it connects to the film and how it connects to the 1963 book.
Well, it's a sequel, and it is a sequel that is set 45 years later. We are connected to Walter Tevis's wonderful novel certainly in theme and certainly in the ideas that he was exploring. We're both huge Nicholas Roeg fans. We're all huge Bowie fans. So to chase that very timely, very seminal piece of work, we figured would be the kiss of death and would, get us more hate mail than usual. So we did our best to be as brave and as curious and as honest in our writing and imagining as those creators were then. But we are catching up with our second alien, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, who shows up on Earth to continue the mission that Thomas Newton, David Bowie's character, started 45 years earlier. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah. That's a very good point.
It took forever. It took me until now. And I've been working on this for 4 years.
Well, I'm glad that this is a place where you finally pulled it all together. We definitely appreciate that. So Chiwetel, I wanted to ask you a little bit. In a way, you're not playing Bowie's character, but you still are stepping into some pretty big shoes here. Can you tell us a little bit about Mr. Faraday and how he connects to the legacy of this project, and if you felt like you were stepping into some pretty big shoes and taking over this character?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that. Yeah, I did. I think that the imprint on this character that David Bowie left is on Thomas Jerome Newton is huge. The story of the man who fell to earth. It's he's absolutely iconic in every single frame of the film, and it's extraordinary to watch. And so I was a huge fan of what he did in the film and the kind of the film. And so to play a character from the same planet, who's an extension of this same this sort of world, and a continuing element in the sort of mission of Thomas Jerome Newton is was definitely felt like, you know, big shoes to fill, and exciting for that. You know, he's also very different to that character, and you know, and Thomas Jerome Newton is in the show as well, so you get to see and understand the, you know, there's distinct dynamics between these two characters, and that's a very rich part of the story. So he is, in his own way, you know, an individual, and that was, and the creation of Faraday as an individual. We talked a lot about his sort of soul, you know, that he is, he becomes more human as the story goes on, but he doesn't change his essential nature. And his essential nature is consistent. You know, he is a being that lives on Anthea in a certain way and has a certain attitude, has a certain response to the dynamics around him. And some of those he carries with him to Earth. Some of them he adapts, and he sort of evolves in the process and the journey of the story in kind of really rich and I think deeply profound ways. And so it really felt like an extension of the world that was set up by the film, and an exploration into this very rich, layered, dynamic character.
And so for people who might not know the sort of original film or the book, in this limited series, you know, this being that we come to eventually know as Faraday is an alien who's come to Earth. His world is in peril, and he's hoping to find something on our world that will help both worlds, that will help Earth and help his world. And he winds up connecting with Naomie's character. So Naomie, could you talk a little bit? It seems like your character is almost like an avatar for the audience. You know, we're learning about Faraday through watching your character's reaction to him. Can you talk a little bit about Justin and about her status as sort of, you know, a version of the audience, and how we learn about everything that's going on through her eyes?
Yeah, I mean, Justin is an incredible woman who we see at the start of the series, who's really forgotten who she is and forgotten what she's capable of, and is just kind of on the hamster wheel of survival, basically. And she is laden down with responsibilities. You know, she has her father who's incredibly sick. She has to raise her daughter. She's working this incredibly demanding job, physically demanding job, that's way beneath her skill set. And she's just in survival mode, basically. And the last thing she needs is someone else to take care of. But being the huge-hearted person that she is, despite the fact he's incredibly weird, she still is, her heartstrings are pulled, and she feels like a responsibility to take this man to his destination. And just the more time she spends with him, the weirder and weirder he seems. And it really is testament to what an incredible woman Justin is, that she keeps him in the car with her and fulfills, you know, the mission that he wants to, you know, her to fulfill, which is to get him to this particular point. But the whole way, he is clearly not in a great state of mind, and she just doesn't feel like he's capable of looking after himself without her doing that. And so that's why she does this very kind, noble thing, as well as the money, I have to say.
Yes. The money helps. And you know, what's interesting to me is, you know, this is the story of two essential outsiders who are actually sort of banding together to go on this quest. And I wondered if one thing that sort of feeds that sense that they're outsiders is that these are two people of color. These are two Black people working together. And I know, I mean, you guys were raised in Britain, but here in America, certainly Black Americans often feel like outsiders in our own land. And I wonder if any of that sort of relates to, you know, seeing these two Black characters at the heart of this story.
Oh, absolutely. Alex and I, the first character that we truly, and we started with the character of Justin, understandably, because Faraday is an alien, and the only thing that we understood, I think, at the beginning of this process was that there was a Faraday Buster Keaton connection in our. We were like that it's him.
That's why you had him stick a garden hose down his throat.
The engine that is Buster Keaton very much informed that's all that we knew at the very beginning. But Justin, we understood immediately, and we understood that she had to be a woman of color. First of all, there are three responses to what you just said. One is Naomie Harris and Chiwetel Ejiofor said yes. So we fell down on our knees and thanked the baby Jesus that happened. Right. So that's one, and that's right there. The second answer is, in the creation of Justin, we needed someone with a particular worldview. And I will make the argument that Black women are of the most vulnerable population on the planet. So coming from the most vulnerable population, I do believe that you get a perspective that is vital and necessary. And if someone who knew nothing about humanity needed to know about humanity, I think it would be wisest of that person to ask a Black woman. Thirdly, every time you see a Black face on your television screen, it makes it less remarkable to see a Black face on your television screen. And this is that team. And that's what we do.
Awesome. Chiwetel or Naomie, what do you guys think about that question?
Naomie, what would you like to? Which part of the question? I mean,
I was sort of asking about this idea. I mean, one of the things that vibed for me when I was watching it was here's two outsiders kind of coming together to do something for everyone else. and as I said before, Black Americans, we can feel like outsiders in our own country. And so in these two characters, I mean, certainly, Justin is African American and Faraday is learning how to be an African American. So it seems like, there's a connection there. It seems like that just kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think that I think it's very layered for me, actually, because it's layered in the racial experience. It's also layered in the migration experience, and so that's definitely something that I'm very connected to in terms of being a Black person in the UK, and my family migrating to England, before I was born, but that being very much the spirit and the nature of how I was raised, and that understanding and the balancing of those two things. And I think that one of the things that I really related to within the context of that is that with this story is the way that we view and we see migration, the way that as a kind of global community, we see migration. And we often couch it sometimes in terms of people arriving because they want to pull something out of this dynamic. They have something that they need out of the dynamic of a place and a space. And rarely do we see this dynamic explored so deeply as somebody, which is so often the case with migration, that there is actually a duality to that experience, that you bring so much, you inform a place. You can bring something very formal, I mean, obviously skill sets and whatever, but mostly you bring an attitude, a way of looking at the world, that can enrich the place that you arrive in, that can sometimes change it dramatically forever, that can remind people as well of their own rights and responsibilities within that dynamic, that being an outsider is such a kind of powerful space to be, can be so informative and so rich, and places are, inevitably enriched by a diversity of community, so in a way, what this is saying is, yes, this person arrives and he uses these terms. These terms are very literal. He's an alien, but he talks of himself as a refugee, as an immigrant. And we understand what those kind of mean in our context, but look at what he's bringing to this space, to this place, to humanity, what he's trying to inform and infuse in the experience of human beings, you know. So it was the duality, the richness of the conversation about what migration is, what being an outsider is, what embracing different people and their skill sets, cultures, and attitudes is and means to a host place, be that a country or be that a planet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's so interesting to see that as Faraday learns more about humanity, he seems in some ways to be more horrified by us as he starts to figure out more about us, you know. He still can't understand why we do some of the things we do.
I don't know why we do some of the things we do.
But he spends time as well with this family, you know, and he learns about the great things about humanity, the truly remarkable things that humanity have, and that frankly humanity is afforded to have because they exist on a planet which assists them. They're a planet that assists humans in everything they want to do. Humans can experience all of these wonderful things. They can experience love and connection and family, all of these dynamics. They can, you know, roll in meadows and read poetry if they want, because they have a planet that supports them. And he's coming from a place where that no longer is happening, you know, and that distinction, you know, is really profound and clear to him.
That's amazing. You know, it's interesting because as the story starts to move along and Rob Delaney's character kind of joins in, we get this sense of a sort of ragtag band of outsiders who are trying to save the world despite itself. And you know, that's always been a great sort of storytelling device. But at this time where we're dealing with a pandemic, that people are sort of actively resisting vaccines, actively resisting mitigation techniques. In a weird way, it feels so appropriate to what we're all going through as a society. And I was wondering, you know, maybe Alex or Jenny, you might want to talk a little bit about how that element of the story relates to where we are right now and why it might feel particularly appropriate to tell this story in this moment.
I don't think anybody ever really sits down to say, we're going to do something that's going to hit the zeitgeist. Like, it's very difficult to target things that way. I think that what we were more focused on was, and it's interesting because we started writing this in 2018, so the world changed significantly, and in other ways it never changed, but everything came to the fore significantly after that. And we were looking around and we were sort of seeing the way our country was going, and in many ways, many countries are going, and able to make less and less sense of what we were seeing. And rather than take a sort of polarizing position, you know, sort of a bipartisan position, I think we were looking to make sense of this thing, and that's the beauty that art affords you. And so rather than saying, you know, let's do something preachy, it was more like, let's do something that presents a whole bunch of characters with different points of view and see what happens when you put them all together. Because that's really what's beautiful about humans. You know, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, we're all sharing the same space and we have to figure it out one way or the other. And the thing that I think Jenny and I like to do is do it in a way where you don't feel like you're eating your vegetables, but by the end of the experience, you've actually had a very full meal. And we've stealth bombed a whole lot of things in there, you know? And I think that the best way to do that is through entertainment, through great characters. And I think our secret weapon was humor. And nobody associates humor with the film. I don't think there's a single moment that's funny. And we kind of went, you know, if we're going to embrace the weirdness, like part of what's beautiful about the weirdness is the comedy. But the comedy only works when it's ordinary people reacting to extraordinary circumstances. That's how it feels real and grounded. So by the time you get Rob coming in and Sonia coming in and Jimmy coming in and Kate coming in, you have this incredibly diverse group of people with very different points of view about this particular story. Some people are wanting to stop him and some people are wanting to help him. And that's a really fun thing. I think that one of the things that also really excited us was the moment that streaming television gives you right now, you don't have to introduce all your characters in the pilot. And so for us, the pilot was, let's just form this foundational story between these two characters and take the time to fall in love with them, because once that's happened, it will let us turn over different cards in subsequent episodes. So you take the first two episodes really to you know, it isn't until the beginning of the third episode, which you've just seen, for Justin to say yes. So, you know, it could have been an easy, if we were doing a network version of that, she would have said yes by the end of the teaser, or at least act one, right?
Mhm.
He would have had to.
And then we would have gone to an act break for like Cialis. Am I allowed to say that?
You sure are. You sure are. We'll even say Viagra. We'll say that. How's that?
The beauty is that we get to do that. And I think being able to rely on, I mean, this cast and the gifts that they gave us. I had the privilege of getting to direct the first 4 episodes, and just every day was a series of gifts where you're just opening Christmas presents all day long. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the trust that you form with somebody early on, and the safe space you create for each other to like experiment and make mistakes, and all mistakes are okay because they lead to other great things, and there's no wrong answer to any question. And that's a very special place to live for all of us. So hopefully, long way around to your question, by the time you get to that group of characters, both the characters and the actors have come to a place where they're fully invested in their roles.
That makes sense. And, you know, what's interesting to me too, you know, you and Jenny have also been involved with the Star Trek franchise and creating new visions of a franchise that's been around a long time and that a lot of people love. In this project, you're doing that as well. You're taking on a project that was a well-regarded movie and a well-regarded book before that. So how do you figure out how to create a modern vision while also having enough nods to the classic version that people recognize what you're doing?
I think it's funny. If someone had said to us, create a modern vision of, I would have gone in complete brain lock, just and Alex has actually seen it happen. On Zooms, people ask me a question. What we tried to do, first of all, it's a different time, and you can only look through the binoculars you have, and the binoculars you have, it's 2022. This is how we're looking. Every day, the planet feels new, right? And that connected us actually to the character of Faraday in a very particular way. And it also connected us to the character of Justin. She's a woman who's losing the family. She's very distant from herself. And now her father is growing more and more distant every day. So her planet is new every moment. And if we watch Pilot, it's a planet that is very hostile to the character of Justin Falls. That said, you can only be where you are now. So a modern version is Alex and I at this moment in our lives, and everybody who worked, the entire cast, the entire crew, all the writers, trying to honor the bravery and the curiosity and the love that Walter Tevis had, that Nicholas Roeg brought, that Candy Clark brought, certainly that David Bowie brought, that Rip Torn brought, and to the people who pushed this vision out in the first place, because it's a bold thing to do, to say, I'm going to create a world and show it to everybody. Lived in my imagination, and now it's out here, everybody look. That's scary. These guys do it every freaking day in front of a camera. I don't know how. There's no magic answer to how do you make something modern except be your bravest. And we're fallible humans, and we're whatever, but we tried to be brave.
I think the other thing too is that science fiction is never about the future, even if the story takes place in the future, right? It's always allegorical to whatever's happening now. And certainly Star Trek has been that since its inception. It's always been, in every iteration, it's been a mirror that holds itself up to whatever's going on in the world at the time. So it's just following suit with the best of science fiction in general. So I think that's probably the other answer too, is that if you're if you're using science fiction or genre to talk about things that are happening in the world now, it becomes a very compelling way to process things without necessarily the direct main line of having to, we could have told the same kinds of stories, but without the buffer of genre, in some ways, it's harder to see it. And it's certainly harder to get an audience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Chiwetel, I wanted to ask you about evolving Faraday, because we see him in the first episode, we sort of see him sort of fully acclimated. He's he's very good at communicating. He's delivering a speech at this conference. And then in the very next few scenes, we see what he was like when he first landed and how long that road was to becoming that person that we eventually see. Can you talk a little bit about figuring out how you were going to play each stage of this alien and show how he slowly began to understand how to communicate with humans?
Yeah, I mean, it was it was a phenomenal aspect of the script. That here's a character that's going to go on this enormous journey, who's going to begin to learn about humanity from a kind of outside perspective, and then have an internal change to really understand humanity psychologically and emotionally, which is this other kind of profound and complex change that he goes through. And that was really exciting, but it was clearly going to be really quite challenging as well. And it required a lot of kind of thinking and modulating that we were all able to kind of do together, and spent a lot of time talking through all of the beats of this character, all of the energies and how it sort of changes and evolves, and what the moments are that kind of instigate these different kind of turning points for Faraday and his learning experience, and to try to kind of to do that in the way of making the show, which is slightly out of sequence. It seems kind of complex and crazy as you sort of take it apart, but then as you start to put it together, one of the things that's been most gratifying about this incredibly rich experience is actually, as we've been putting it together and seeing the arc of this character kind of come to life, has been incredible. And I think he's probably one of the richest and most interesting parts that I've ever played. And it really is down to these guys, to Alex and Jenny, and the crafting of this extraordinarily special character who feels very real to me and very kind of emotionally rooted, and his journey seems so truthful and honest.
Does it get down to the point where you sort of say, okay, in the second episode, this is how he talks, and then by the time we get to the third episode, he has a little more command of English, or he doesn't scream the F word at people, or you sort of figure out and keep track of how this guy's evolving?
I mean, that's exactly how we were tracking it, and it came down to words, how he processes words, how the speed within which he's hearing or thinking about a word and able to say it, just all of these things, the nature of how he's commanding these things. And then at the same time, running concurrently is this emotional awakening that he's having, and how that affects his language and his attitude, So, it was a fascinating process.
And Naomie, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Justin, because it feels like a lot of these characters, their biggest challenge is that they just keep getting in their own way. They can't get out of their own way to be their best selves in some ways. And she seems like the ultimate embodiment of that in this story. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that part of it, and how part of the message of this seems to be, part of the success of even the Earth itself is, can we just get out of our own way enough to do what we need to do to save the planet?
Yeah, I think, Justin's in her own way, not for being in her own way's sake, right? She's racked with a tremendous amount of guilt. And right. I don't know if by episode 3, they discover what that guilt is all about.
No, I think that's episode 4 where we see that.
Right. So there are specific reasons why she's kind of given herself over to this life of effective torture. She stripped all joy from her life, and and there's specific reasons for that. But I think, you know, what I think is amazing about Justin's journey is that she ultimately is, we start with her just so fixated and concerned about her personal life and the life of her loved ones, and her concerns aren't global at all. And Faraday's completely are, and he has no personal links, it would seem, whatsoever. And then as the journey goes on, they switch places, and she's willing to sacrifice the things that she loves most for global concerns, for the rest of humanity. And Faraday's are different. You know, he becomes much more concerned with the personal and the family that he's left behind. But I think it's Justin, ultimately, he does the most sacrificial thing, and represents the highest ideal of what it means to be human, because she's willing to give up what she loves most for humanity.
Right.
I can say a thing just about that character. Naomie said that she's stripped joy from her life. I think it's important to remember that joy is really expensive. Joy, because if you're going to feel joy, you're going to feel all the other stuff too. Right. And for this particular woman, and for a million different reasons, and some of them are Eat Your Vegetables reasons, and some of them are the trajectory of her own personal story. But this is a woman who is solely responsible for the lives of two other beings. She's also her father and her daughter. She's also, and we meet her in the pilot, she is a caretaker of the planet. She's cleaning up other people's mess. So just who's allowed what joy means and how valuable it is. And Faraday even talks about joy and gets to joy, even discussing it and what a sort of gift it is a couple of episodes in. It's like imagination. I don't think that you can separate the two. Something uniquely human. And Justin's remembrance of joy and her remembrance that she trusts her own imagination are the things that save the planet. Right. Is that a spoiler? Sorry.
No, we're hoping the planet gets saved at the end of all this. But no, you're right. And also, you know, she's somebody who's been through trauma. And
she lives as she lives in America.
And doesn't necessarily trust her own decision making because of
Very
that
much so.
trauma. So that's, you know, I don't know. It kind of feels like we're talking about Naomie like she's in the third person or something.
Naomie's ability, I have to say, like, I mean, it's so true for both of them, but Naomie's ability to step into that, like, there was one particular, I mean, there's so many, but there's one particular moment that really, I was like, this person is an extraordinary talent. We were shooting the scene in the pilot where she's, where you meet Justin, and she's under like 17,000 pounds of rubber suit. Like you can't see her face. And I called action on the scene where she's just walking across, you know, and this is what you're seeing of Naomie through her mask. And the minute I called action, her eyes went dead. And she went right into like, this is where this woman is living right now. This is where she is in this particular moment in time. And to be able to communicate that just through this, I mean, it was sort of stunning to me, you know, that's what I mean by the gifts. Like every day there were these extraordinary gifts where, you know, I think everyone on the cast stepped into the shoes of the people they were playing at a certain point. It became indistinguishable. And that's the beautiful thing that happens when, you know, Jenny and I can write a script, but at a certain point, you hope that the actors will take it from you and make it theirs. And then it becomes very difficult to tell the difference, you know, in some ways when you're on set. And that was an extraordinary thing to watch every day.
So Naomie, I got to ask you, what were you thinking when you were doing that? Were you thinking her eyes must be dead? Or were you thinking, I don't want to step in that puddle?
I certainly wasn't thinking her eyes have to be dead. So it's amazing that Yeah, that was what Alex saw. Thank you for that, Alex. Yeah, I was just thinking about her concerns, which are just get through this nightmare of a job and get home to my family, make the money that I need to survive. And I know that even by doing this, we're still going to come up short as we do each month. And also I need to pay for the pills for my dad as well. So a lot going through my mind at that point. Yeah.
I hear you. So speaking of gifts, you guys have an amazing cast on this limited series, including Bill Nye playing Bowie's character, Thomas Newton. And so could you guys talk a little bit about how this version of the character may connect to what Bowie did, and why Bill Nye was the guy to inhabit that character?
Well, Bill Nye is the guy to inherit all the characters. I propose a Bill Nye network. All Bill, all the time. But Alex, maybe you want to take this one.
I mean, I think we all knew that the minute you're stepping into the David Bowie world, you're playing Russian roulette, except you have 5 bullets in the gun, not 1. And so I think we were very, it started actually weirdly at script level because, Bowie gives the most extraordinary performance in that film. Talk about somebody who became the character. And obviously that's what he did particularly at that time in his career. But we did not want to do a David Bowie impression on any level. And we also felt that the character, by the nature and by definition of what he was in that film and in the story, he was a very passive character, right? He came here, he was an innocent, he succumbs to human vices and fails in his mission, becomes an alcoholic and is blinded. So it's a very sort of essentially passive role. And we knew that was not going to work. That the step number 1 to avoiding that was to figure out who he would be 45 years later. And the idea that all of the betrayal that he had experienced and all of the human frailty that really did him in would have metastasized into something very dark. And also, weirdly, as you'll see over the course of the season, there's a real logic to the conclusions that he's come to about human beings that are sort of undeniable. And no matter what you think, whether you love humans or what he says is pretty undeniable. Yeah. And he's had 45 years to come up with a plan to how to take back what was his. And so we knew that we needed a character who was essentially the most unreliable narrator in the world, that he'd been broken, right? And the minute Jenny and I were like, well, if he's a little bit insane, and you have a character in Faraday who shows up blindly following rules and has blindly followed the guy who's really been his kind of surrogate father his entire existence, and all he knows how to do is follow rules. And then you get here assuming you're going to get that same guy that you left 45 years ago, only to discover that he's swigging gin and, making no sense whatsoever. And it threw everything out of whack. So it made us instantly go, well, we're not in a David Bowie impression anymore, because this is totally a different character. And it really dialed up the stakes for Faraday, because he didn't know how to respond to it. But it also meant that the character who was used to following orders was going to have to learn how to start thinking for himself in order to understand what was really happening. So that was a really important thing for all the characters. But Bill, one of the luckiest moments, really, with every member of the cast. But when you've worked on something, and Jenny and I had worked on those scripts for 3 years, but the first time you hear a cast member do the words is an extraordinary moment for the writer and for the director. And since I happen to be both in this case, it was a doubly extraordinary moment. And getting to watch Bill just say, listen, it's going to be terrible, but let me try this for you, right? And then just like, we could have been rolling and it would have been great, right out of the gate. And the best part was that he was like, it was shit, it was terrible, no, give me notes. And I was like, You want me to- and then you realize you're just in this beautiful collaboration, and you're just digging deep and all of the, but you know, he's an actor who's capable of absolutely anything. And the thing that's so beautiful, you know, he had these long monologues, long, I mean, 2 pages where he had to just, and he came to our first rehearsal off book, which was stunning. Off book, entirely off book. And whenever he would like flub one line, he would get so angry at himself. And I was like, okay, well, all right. But it was extraordinary. And I think one of the things that Bill did that he should be most proud of is that he knew he was, no matter what we did, no matter what he did, he was stepping into David Bowie's shoes, no matter what. That's how people were going to see it. And so I think what he does is he is uniquely and singularly Bill in what he does, but you can see the Bowie in there somewhere, but it's not obvious in any way. And it's definitely not an impression. There's a sense of him in there. And with that, as you'll see over the season, comes this, despite all the anger the character has, there is a broken heart in there. And I think Bill will always find the broken heart, no matter where it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what, and what's so interesting to me about the series as a whole is that even though it's a science fiction series, so much of this is about emotion and about sort of beings connecting. And you know, the science fiction part of it is almost on the periphery of what you're doing, which is what makes it so compelling.
Eric, it's so funny that you say that, because I never think of this as a science fiction show ever. I always think of it as people stumbling around trying to find each other.
Exactly. But I'm a sci-fi nerd, so I gotta see it like that.
Yeah.
But I, you know, for my final question, because we're running short on time, man, I could talk about this series for another 2 hours. But
Well, that's great.
But my one of my favorite lines in the series is when he says, "Antheans understand each other. We do not endure each other." And it sums up perfectly sort of the difference between his species and ours, and our problems connecting. And you know, the sense that I got from the episodes I saw, that part of the message is that success lies in human connection, lies in us connecting with each other rather than sort of being isolated and alienated and alone. And I was wondering if I was accurate in perceiving that, and if you guys could talk a little bit about that.
I think Chiwetel should, sorry, Chiwetel, but I think that's you, because you're the one who said it, you know?
I think that I love that line as well, you know, just in so many different levels, so many different ways, because he's also talking about that need for human connection, the way that humans are able to empathize, to connect with each other, to understand each other. It really speaks to the difference in their planetary experiences, you know, that he is from a place where everything is a bit more functional. You know, they have to be, you know, they're in this terrible circumstance. And what I love in the kind of broader sense of the show is that it's not prescriptive in a way, you know, that there are deadlines and there are difficulties ahead maybe for the planet Earth, but that's not necessarily what he's talking about. He's bringing an energy which sort of says, I can't tell you entirely what your future will be, but I can tell you what my experience was, and this is it. And do with this information what you choose. And that, I think, is a really a perfect, you know, a sort of a perfect sentiment for the times that we live in.
That makes sense. Anybody else want to add anything before we close all of this out?
I think Eric, to answer your question, you're exactly right. I mean, ultimately, we made a show about the need for human connection at a time where everybody is so disparate and separated. And that is ultimately the thing that's going to save us, is understanding each other. You know, that's the only thing that's going to save us, because right now it seems to be in very short supply. And I feel like one of the great things that an immersive experience like a movie or television show can give you is it can remind you of your place in the world, right? I mean, a really great story is like a dream, because you forget your reality for the period of time that you're watching it, and then you get snapped back into it, right? And that's all of our jobs, is to make you forget that reality, so that when you come back to your reality, you have a new perspective on who and where you are. And that's what we try to do every day on the show. But you nailed it exactly. That is what it's about.
Well, thank you. As a critic, that makes me feel great. So thank you guys so much for joining us in this amazing conversation. I wish we could talk so much longer about this, but I want to thank you guys for joining us. And I want to remind the audience that you can catch up and see new episodes of The Man Who Fell to Earth streaming on Showtime. So make sure you catch up and make sure you watch the episodes that you didn't get to see here. And thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.